Top of the top of the top of the morning.
Yeah, I was trying to come up with a funny bit.
They drew first blood.
Yeah, I got nothing.
I don't know. This book was pretty fucking
You don't
pretty
pay me
heavy.
enough.
Yeah, I couldn't come up with a funny bit for this book. I was like, damn, how do I? No, that's not appropriate. Um, but yeah, we read First Blood this month. Um, I guess I'll give a quick synopsis if y'all are all right with
Right.
that.
Please, it's I definitely out of everyone, I think you've quite enjoyed this book the most.
I really like this book. The too long didn't read of this book is basically this kid named Rambo, motherfucker, um, was a United States veteran, not just a veteran, but a Green Beret veteran, and he's left Vietnam and he's back in the United States, and he's doing his thing. Surprise, surprise, he's got this thing called post traumatic stress disorder. Um, and so like he's just been kind of wandering around from town to town doing his thing because he doesn't really know what else to do because he's like what like
Early 20s, I think it said.
yeah, it's like he's got to be at least 21, 22. He's pretty young, at most mid 20s, but I don't even think that. And because he looks pretty rough, he's got long hair and he's got a beard, and
A filthy hippie.
yeah, people think he's a damn hippie, so they run him out of town. And eventually, one police officer, one police chief, by the name of what's his first name? Starts with an H.
Wilbur
Horace.
Teasel.
Oh, Wilfred.
Wilfred,
Wilfred
not Wilbur.
Teasel. Uh, gives this kid a hard time, and finally Rambo's like, you know what? Enough's enough, and they have this back and forth, and eventually they end up triggering Rambo's post-traumatic stress disorder, and all hell breaks loose.
Putting it
And
nicely.
yeah, so that's the synopsis. Is there anything you guys wanted to say at the beginning of this?
Well, just real quick, talking about ages. So, um, what's his name? Troutman?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Towards the end, he does mention that Rambo, like, enlisted himself. He wasn't
Yeah.
drafted. So, as far as ages go, like, I feel like we could place how old he's supposed to be pretty easily. So, this is supposed to just be, like, a couple years after, quote unquote, the end of the Vietnam, quote, war.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the Vietnam War was still going on during the course of the book. That he had, after being captured, he had been honorably discharged.
Hmm.
Though I might have misread that. I'm
Yeah,
prone
now
to
I'm
doing
not
that.
sure. I'm not confident anymore. I was like, oh, we could just guess because this is after the war, right? But I guess maybe it wouldn't be.
I think we can definitely get a age range.
But yeah,
I think from like, oh, go ahead.
early 20s works.
Yeah, early 20s between like I'd say probably 21 to 25 at the most would make sense to me.
Yeah, I don't think it's I think he's closer to 21, 22, 23, somewhere around there.
Hmm. Yeah, he's this young gun, spent his whole life effectively either learning how to kill or with his abusive father, we find out. So, he's not the most well-adjusted, doesn't really have any marketable skills post-Vietnam. And if, for you, those of you who do not know your history, Vietnam vets are not treated very well by anyone.
Nope.
Least of all
Anti-war,
Vietnam.
yeah, anti-war protesters didn't like him. Shockingly, the government and most institutions didn't give a shit about him.
Well, the government treats all veterans pretty equally shitty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And you're adding on top of it that, like, American
Vietnam being,
citizens already didn't like the Vietnam War, generally speaking.
and then most government officials just wanting to put it behind them because it was embarrassing. which led to obviously a lot of resentment and a lot of existence of a lost generation, which is, I think, is actually the generation that went to Vietnam is referred to as the lost generation.
I believe that one's Korea, actually.
Ah, Korea, pardon me.
Bows.
Isn't the history grand? There's so much shit happens.
Oh.
And so much bad shit.
Yep, most of it bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty crucial to like kind of getting a nail down to just realize just how fucking awful everyone in this book except for Troutman treats Rambo.
Yeah. Like, homie orders a cheeseburger, and like even like the lady screws that up.
I think that's so. I did have the thought. It's not a funny book, but I did have the thought towards the end of the book. I was like, "Damn, do you think he would have went this far if that burger didn't suck ass?" Like he describes
Because
it pretty horrendously. I
and
wouldn't have even eaten it.
a lot of his central motivation to like he's kind of like he has like an argument about himself about like why he did that. And his whole thing is like, you could have stopped this at any time. You did not have to go this far. And he's like, yeah, but I'm tired of being treated like shit by everyone. I think the exact quote is, everyone was pushing. I just finally decided to push back.
Yeah. And that's kind of a running theme of Rambo, like being like, maybe I should call it quits, but everyone else won't call it quits.
I think it's important to note that Rambo killing several people, not entirely justified, but definitely vindicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess does anyone have any opening thoughts past that, or do we
There's a
want
lot.
to
It's
get
just
to the good parts, the bad parts, where we want to go?
Well, here.
Go
I'll
ahead.
start with the stuff I liked, kind of broadly speaking. I really like. There's a lot to actually like peel apart about this book. Even just like the surface, like it's not even surface level, but the main level of like treating veterans like shit. You know, competition that veterans feel towards other veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And just their entire like Teasel and Rambo's like dynamic. They're foils of each other. Like they're the same person, but they're also completely different people. Like that alone, so much there. You could spend all day like peeling this apart. Thank you, Jacob. You could spend all day peeling this apart and just looking at it. And I really appreciated that. I think the only downside I felt about it though is that it takes a while to get to that. Feel like, I mean, it makes sense, but this book takes a few minutes to get started. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's slow. There's a lot of setup, I think, because in the pre-word, I don't know if it was in your editions of the book, the author kind of talks about his like why he wrote it, his thoughts on it, his thoughts on the movies, and one of the big reasons he wrote the book the way he did was because like well, it was based on the experiences of the kids in his class who were drafted, and his intent was to like effectively bring the Vietnam War to small town America. Because multiple times, I think he picked Kentucky and kind of the hillscape there, very specifically because it resembles a lot of the foliage Rambo would have been used to in Korea or Vietnam, pardon.
Mm-hmm.
Those hills and valleys and caves and sweeping. Obviously, not nearly as tropical, but
Yeah.
enough to approximate.
It's forested, so.
Hmm. And I think that's pretty important to also note going into this book is like kind of the reasons why this book exists, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just think the book's cool.
It is really cool. I've ever since you posted that Bow, shout out to the Bow Buddy meme, the Orc only stands surface docks of Ulysses, like I don't even remember, but that meme got me. It was like, ah, yes.
Yeah, and like Jordy said, there's a lot here. Like, there's a lot to Rambo. There's a lot to Teasel. There's a lot to the two of them. Is there any criticisms anyone had?
Mm,
I think honestly, the first part of this book I was pretty judgmental because I just don't think I like his writing style very
Mhm.
much. And when he's not describing action scenes, it's a bit juvenile in a sense. And I guess I can't really explain that further, but
Mm-hmm.
it just didn't feel as elevated as it could be. But once he started getting into like action scenes and stuff, it's pretty easy to tell that he probably felt a little more comfortable writing about that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And that's
mm.
okay. We all have specialties. But I think it just made that first like 50-page chunk that much harder to get
Yeah,
through.
it's once things pop off, this book is hard to put down, but it is slow to
Yeah.
start.
Mm-hmm. And I
I
think
also, oh, go
also,
ahead.
last thing, I think also kind of made, maybe to its benefit, it made that first bit really weird where, like, Teasel's just trying to, like, he thinks he's being nice when he's just, like, picking up Rambo and dropping him off on the side of the road. And
He's like,
and that's like
go ahead.
kind of that's like a massively dick move
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah,
clearly offending Rambo and you know it just makes that part feel so much weirder, but I think it actually kind of works in
yeah, because
favor.
Teasel's mind, he's like, oh, I'm sure this kid is used to getting shit on by everyone. I'm just gonna be like, hey, can't stay here, but you don't gotta go home. Get out of my town. I'll be friendly and do the nice thing and let him get out. And then Ramble's like, hey, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Also, sorry to kind of piggyback off of your point about the violence and the action, is I've seen this book also described kind of as carnogore,
Mm-hmm.
carnage or pornography. It was the abbreviated. We would know that as gore porn in the modern era.
Mm.
And I don't disagree. It's something I get why they did it, but I do think they kind of overdid it a little bit. I think some of the kills were a little needless.
I
What?
think just the first one.
The first one was brutal, yeah.
I think that one's
Yeah.
probably the only one I thought was too far.
I
I.
don't necessarily too far wouldn't be something I would say. Just it's like it definitely feels like shock, blood, violence.
Well,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you could
Not
probably
that
see
it was
part of
intentional,
that
yeah.
is just to like be like,
Highlight.
here it is. This is where we're going. You know what I mean?
Hmm. And I don't disagree. I'm certain that that was a big part of it as well, but it did definitely feel like some aspects were taken away because it was like
Mm-hmm.
I guess I also wanted to talk. Obviously, I'm sure we're going to talk about the the movie versus the book, and I might actually save this thought for the book, or for the movie versus book decision.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know. It didn't bother me. And not even in the way that like I'm not used to reading stuff like this. I just didn't
Yeah.
I didn't think most of it didn't go too far in my mind. I think there's a difference between just like describing the horror of it versus dwelling on the horror of it.
Hmm.
And I think that first kill where he kills the cop in the jail cell, that one kind of felt more like dwelling and the other ones felt more like describing. I don't know if I'm making that make sense, but no, Rambo kills people. He's designed to kill people. He
Yeah,
was
he
designed to
is
kill
a weapon.
people, and I feel like the most of the kills are described in a nice, well, maybe nice is the wrong word, but a certain enough way that it gets that point across very
Yeah.
well.
Hmm. He's in a very efficient killer.
Mm-hmm.
It does kind of everything pretty efficiently.
Almost like instead of learning useful skills, life skills that would have prepared him for civilian world, he was taught how to kill and thrown away.
Yeah, and that's it.
Mm.
Um. Yeah, I don't even know where else to go with this because there's so much.
Hmm.
Um.
I feel like it's another one, kind of like Blade Runner, where there's just a lot to talk about, and it's kind of hard to necessarily number that
Pick.
down into a very digestible format.
Yeah. Pick. Does anyone have anything they really want to talk about in particular? Like,
Mm,
Let's see.
like
one thing.
I have
Oh,
something
go
I
ahead.
want to talk about, but it's towards the
Oh.
end.
Gotcha.
So
One thing I do want to talk about, which is I guess more of a running theme, is I like the dichotomy between Teasel and Rambo. Both being vets of a very different war, how they're kind of like relationships with the world and their partners and like their families, and how they're played against each other in a lot of ways. And I
I
thought it was a very interesting dichotomy.
I think I wrote it in my little Goodreads review where I said, like, even compared to Rambo's extreme reaction to events, you quickly realize that Teasel may not have come to terms with his war either.
yeah,
Hmm.
I kind of went off with that.
because sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say because there's definitely parts where he's like running around, like talking about, especially towards the beginning, how much he enjoys what's happening.
Mhm.
Not completely. Like part of him knows he's enjoying, like chasing Rambo through the woods, or like, um, when they towards the end when they make it back to town and he's like chasing Rambo, through the town. Like there's definitely part of him that I think maybe misses some of it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Hmm.
He
Or
like
longs
misses
for
it.
it, maybe not so much misses.
Yeah, like he longs for it, and he hasn't even had that like conversation with himself that like, oh, maybe I didn't work through my stuff. And like it's kind of buried underneath the fact that he's like coping with the death of his like foster father figure
Hmm.
right in front of his face. He's like coping with this imminent divorce that he knows is coming, but he doesn't want it to come.
And the death
Uh
of his original father, or his actual father as well.
yeah, his actual dad, his mom, and then on top of that, all of his police department that has now been killed by Rambo. Like
Yeah.
he's a man that just doesn't deal with stuff.
Which is very indicative of the older generation.
Which
Mm-hmm.
is also kind of interesting because it's like the more he doesn't deal with his own problems, the more he pushes them onto someone else. For example, Rambo, and then just the worst everything gets. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like he's like, oh well, I want to put off calling my ex-wife or current wife, however you would word that. So I'm just gonna take my time processing this kid who really hasn't done anything wrong, but and then it just, you know, progressively gets worse from there.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'm
It's
wording
kind
that properly.
No, I get it.
it is insane to think all the bloodshed and carnage literally started because Teasel's kind of just a dick.
Mm-hmm. A dick that thinks he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Hmm. Telling me nice guys finish last?
Mm. You hate to see it. I'm trying to find. I think the only thing that I really wanted to point out at this point was that little there's like a little dialogue between Teasel and Stropman, like right when they meet for the first time, and Stropman basically just like calls him the F out for all of
Hmm.
it. He's like,
Yeah.
you just took that guy in, you didn't even ask why he was acting the way he was, you didn't think about any of it. You know, you probably could have clearly prevented a lot of this, and you just kind of have your
Just
head up your
didn't.
ass.
Yeah, you did what you're telling yourself was right,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of interesting because that's kind of like how society is we not just like veterans but people with mental health issues in general, we don't really take the time to try and figure out and accommodate those things and help those people. We're just like, well, you're not fitting into this little box we want, so fuck you, I guess.
Just
Mm-hmm.
man up.
Yeah,
Be a
literally.
man. Drink every day.
And then just Strawman has like a ton of quotables in that part. Teasel
Yeah,
says, I don't kill for a living, and Strawman's like, of course not. You tolerate a system that lets others do it for you.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, damn.
Troutman. Troutman continues to be the most base character in that fucking book.
he's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I
very
highlighted
Also,
almost that whole page where he's talking.
it's also very interesting his perspective on his academy. I guess you could call it that.
hmm,
Like
it's
how he doesn't necessarily train them, or from his point of view, He's just trying to make sure that they get back alive, rather.
Yeah, he's
than,
not training men to kill. He's training men to survive.
which is very interesting because that's how war be.
I always think of this book. Also, a lot of times, maybe think about one of my favorite shows of all time, MASH.
Oh yeah,
And the whole like war is hell, and no, hell is hell. War is war. There are no innocents in hell. To paraphrase the famous Hawkeye quote.
yeah.
That's one of those shows. I watched that at my grandma's house sometimes when I was a wee little kid, and even when I was a kid, I knew most of it was going over my.
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't getting it.
I'm about to say I watched that show every day after school for most of high school because it would just be on when I got home, and so I do my homework while watching it. But yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I think that's also an interesting aspect to look at it, how the military versus the civilian versus like the veteran personalities. And spoilers for the very end of the book, having Troutman be the one to kill him,
Yeah.
put him out of his misery, quite literally. I think it was pretty poetic.
Oh yeah, here's the quote I wanted to specifically talk about. He just kind of says the quiet part that we're all thinking. But Teasel says, "For a colonel, the way you're talking, you don't seem to like the military very much."
Oh yeah.
And Strawman says, "Of course I don't. Who in his right mind would?"
Yeah.
And I think that's it's interesting too, thinking about the movie compared to that. They don't really have that kind of moment in the movie at all. But we'll get there.
Yeah.
I think Troutman's character is pretty consistent, but they definitely cut a lot of things for the sake of.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay to say I didn't like Teasel very much?
Oh yeah.
I didn't like him at all.
Because
I
know.
don't think. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say in Mr. Morel's forward, he talks about how he wanted both characters, Rambo and Teasel, to be sympathetic. And like, I don't hate Troutman, but I'm just like, damn, this guy.
Teasel, not Troutman.
Oh yeah, Teasel. My bad. Teasel is just kind of a dickhead.
I don't despise Troutman. I think Troutman is a character very much shaped by his environment with his own demons. Obviously, as someone Teasel, pardon me.
Yeah,
God,
we're doing the same thing now.
But it's both characters are definitely born by their environment, for better or for worse, and all the hang-ups that come along with that.
Well,
I'm just saying I would divorce Teasel too.
Oh yeah, I would divorce Teasel 5 times. But I think more the point is that Teasel is still like a very fleshed out character.
Yeah, that's
he's a very well written character, and I think even while Mr. Morel may have intended for us to not really take sides in this situation, I think you're supposed to read it in every time Rambo or Teasel makes a decision about something, you're supposed to just go, well, I guess they had to. Like, yeah. I think
like,
that's kind of how
I
you're supposed to
understand.
look at it.
I also wonder, and I thought about this the first time I read it, was like, how much of this is like our perspective, as in like having been so far post Vietnam, but also like our perspective having, how do I word it, like the social climate we're in currently. I feel like we've seen a lot of the aftermath of perspectives, ideas, motivations of people like Teasel. You know what I mean? We're in like the post Teasel era, and I feel like that might be part of why we're like, fuck that guy.
Not to mention, this is a war that's very ubiquitous about like the Vietnam War and the culture and the climate at that time, and we're now post Afghanistan now that we've officially pulled off. And like So our perspectives on the military and police and the treatment of veterans are vastly different in some ways, but also pretty similar, I think.
Yeah.
I think too, like maybe at the time it was a bit different, like
Yeah.
how maybe people generally viewed like Korean War veterans. Whereas, I mean, I'll admit this is kind of my area of not very educated at all, so I don't know a whole lot about wars that happen after World War II. But I feel like Korean War, that is something that we definitely don't keep in mind as much.
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam War is kind of in the same boat just because of how it ended for us.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of is part of it, and I think also it is a bit of the kind of like the old people versus young people
Mhm.
climate that I feel like we all grew up in,
Yeah.
where I feel like most of the older generation kind of demands respect, and I don't think that was as big of an issue back in the 70s.
Mm.
Maybe issue is the wrong word, but that was a little bit more of a given at the
Mhm.
time.
I just kind of want to kick him in the butt a little.
Yeah, I do want to kick his ass. He's not very
Give him a-
chill.
He is a L taker extraordinaire.
Mm-hmm. Look, I'm just gonna
And,
say it. He'd vote Trump.
He would.
I think it's also important to note that like people call him out on it all the time, but because of his like pride, like obviously Rambo killed a lot of people, and some in cold blood, some justified, all vindicated, I'd argue. None of those people had to die. Literally
Yeah.
all a good chunk of that was Tizo's ego causing
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm. Which, okay, I actually want to use that. Rambo kills a lot of people and none of them had to die. And I want to use that and transition into talking about the movie and start with uh, very, very technically, Rambo doesn't kill anybody in the movie.
Correct.
I also want to talk about the movie a lot and stuff like that.
Do we just want to go into that?
Yeah, just I think that first part is what intrigued me because so I started with the book. I actually just watched the movie like 2 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And in the intro, he actually talks of. I think he says that directly. He's like, yeah, in the movie they made sure Rambo didn't kill anybody, but my Rambo definitely killed a lot of people. Just so you know, like he doesn't even really make a lot of comment about it. He just like
Yeah.
states that as fact.
And it makes sense when you especially look at the character that Rambo is supposed to represent. He is literally like the Vietnam War incarnate.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about that? Because I kind of have mixed feelings.
I think the movie's Rambo is a more nuanced character, but I think the book is a lot more powerful of a statement.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
I agree with-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I think, yeah, like with the Adnam, it's not that the book Rambo isn't nuanced. I just think it's a lot.
It's two different kind of stories they're telling.
Yeah. And
And I think the way Stallone plays the character is very, very nice because I feel like you can tell that Rambo's like dripping anxiety the whole time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
you watch it, you
Rambo's
feel he does not want to be doing half of the stuff he's doing.
without the terminology at the time. He was definitely describing like someone having a very long, drawn out panic attack over the course of several days.
and like I kind of wonder like which is better because I think it's very clear that the book Rambo has lost complete control of everything he's doing. He thinks he's in control, but it seems to me like he's just going on pure instinct. Where I think movie Rambo is interesting because he still has that little bit of control. He's just basically in damage control at that point, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And I'm not sure which I prefer.
I guess it kind of depends on the end result
Yeah.
that you're expecting from it. I think the movie definitely like draws your sympathy, especially like at the end where Rambo has that monologue where he's just like, I'm still there, and he's talking
Yeah.
about, he like describes all the horrors he remembers and he has to remember them every day.
Yeah.
I think that really draws out sympathy from you, and it, if you didn't think of it before, you're definitely thinking, oh wow, man, the military kind of sucks
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. I
I
don't think
almost
the book is necessarily like asking you to criticize any of the institution.
Yeah. It does a little bit, but not to the same degree as like the movie.
It's very
Hmm.
light.
Because I mean, in the book, I mean, we have, as you mentioned, the whole, uh, uh, no one likes being in the military quote.
Mm-hmm.
That last scene in the movie is very good.
Hmm.
Yes.
It also helps that that movie was shot like beautifully at all times.
Yeah. Speaking of last scenes, what did you guys think of like the ending of the book?
I thought it was good.
Thumbs up, but I think it went on just a little too long.
Yeah, it actually skipped a few chapters on accident in the audiobook I was recording. I guess I had like slipped over. And I didn't realize how much I had missed until I was like, oh, I'll go back. And I kept going back and there kept being like more. And I was like,
The like whole chase between um Teasel and Rambo is a bit excessive.
Yeah, I
Mm.
think once Rambo gets back into town, that should have been maybe half. Well, maybe should have is the wrong word, but maybe
Could've.
half the length would have been nice.
It also gets a little weird in a lot of ways. Like the whole Teasel having like premonitions about shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what he was trying to do with that one.
Uh, there's a lot of like boy stuff too. I don't know how to describe this. There's like a certain way I've noticed in a lot of like books and movies that deal with explicitly like masculine stuff like war. There's
Mm.
always something that like they're kind of leaning into this brotherhood thing, but
Mhm.
there's something about it that makes it feel a cut deeper than that and more emotional.
Mhm.
And I've never decided how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And that kind of happens here at the end where Teasel has this thing where he like feels like this really deep connection to Rambo, like as they're both dying basically.
Yeah.
And
And
it
he's
get
like, he uses the point like love. Like in this moment, he loves Rambo. Like genuine,
yeah.
like maybe not like romantic love, but like love as an understanding of a family member, or love as like someone you can only like truly understand.
And this isn't the first time I've read something kind of like that. And I don't know, I've never been able to like quite place how I feel about it. It's well written. It's not like a writing issue.
Yeah.
It's just something that I'm like, I don't know what box to put this in. So it's just going to float out there for a while.
I think their deaths were both written pretty interestingly and well.
Mm.
Rambo's death was kind of wild.
Yeah. Man was ready to go 0 to 100 real quick.
Well, and just the way like him dying was written was really
Mm.
interesting. I thought.
I
Yeah,
like
both
how
the
he,
Oh, go ahead.
or the kind of like the monologues about death and like, oh, so this is what death is like. I've thought about it and expected it to be like this, but it's interesting that it's like this.
Yeah.
I think it's funny, like both how they describe death, but also that Rambo was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty much dead. I do still have a stick of dynamite.
Might as well.
I could do something with this stick of dynamite. I'm pretty much dead. I could do something with it though."
You might as well, really, at this point.
Well, and it's also kind of interesting because that kind of shows like he's just on pure instinct mode right until the end. He's like, I gotta do
Mhm.
something else. I gotta do something else.
Like it's literally, it's not even like a rational thought. He's like, I have the ability to still do damage because I was taught to do damage in all things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like he talks about that a little bit when he was on his like retreat through the hills, and he's like, we were taught to like if you're going to be taken out and if you're going to retreat, kill literally everything, as many people as you can. Destroy everything in your path. Do not let anything survive.
Yeah. Which I think makes it interesting that Troutman's the one to do it, because it's like, all right, we gotta shut this thing down. Maybe not the right word, but you get what I mean.
Oh, do you have any more thoughts on the movie?
I don't know.
I have thoughts.
If you do, go ahead.
Truthfully, don't come after me.
Oh, no.
Don't come after me for saying this.
Fuck.
The first bit of the movie, it almost makes it cartoonish, just how silly and fast it gets out of hand.
Yeah.
And also it doesn't help that the dialogue's kind of cheesy at a lot of points. I don't really fault him for that. I was reading some of the trivia notes that Amazon puts on movies, and it kind of sounds like they were changing the script quite literally the day that they would film it, and they would only do like 1 or 2 shots of a lot of the scenes.
Sylvester Stallone used a lot of his. This isn't. I also read up a little bit about the movie because I was curious. Apparently, Sylvester Stallone used a lot of his fame from Rocky to basically force the directors to do screenwrites to make him a more sympathetic character, like the surviving at the end, not killing anyone. That was all.
I don't know if it's true, but one of the Amazon notes was also like, you know, the movie went through a lot of changing of hands.
Yeah.
The book came out in like 72, and the movie didn't come out till 82. So I think the movie changed a lot of hands before it actually got made. And Stallone actually, like, one of the things he was quoted on saying is he was tempted to like break his hand so he didn't have to do the movie.
Oof.
Which I'm glad he did, but like,
it wasn't that bad.
I think it was.
yeah.
I think it was definitely one of the things like he wanted it done his way or the highway.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it was better for it. But
Yeah.
there was a bit of a cheesiness to it that kind of frustrated me. I do think it's funny. It's not supposed to be funny. It is so funny how shitty all of those cops are in the movie. They're just like obsessive, like absurd.
They're
almost
literally
cartoonish.
they're all Benny Hill characters. They're all
Yeah.
like who's the dude from fucking the Andy Griffin Show?
Oh,
Barney.
Yeah.
They're all
Fife.
Barneys. Every single one of them is Barney Fife, except for Tegan and Stillwater.
Honestly, they're all Barney Fife if Barney Fife didn't have any empathy whatsoever. Because like literally they like get Rambo, and they're about to process him to get jailed, and Teasel offhandedly says, "Oh, get him cleaned up, he smells bad." So they take him to the showers, he's shirtless. They see the horrible amount of scars he has all over his body, and that main cop is just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna beat him." Just in the shower after seeing all of these scars.
They're kind of weird about it in the book too, because they're like, "Oh, where'd you get those?" And he's like, at one point he says in the war, and they're like, "Well, yeah, whatever, blah blah blah," and it's like, I see a dude like that. First of all, I'm not screwing with him. Second of all, he says he got them, quote, in the war, and the Vietnam War is either just ended or currently going on. I'm gonna go, oh.
I'm gonna go, you know what? Feather pillow for you, my friend.
Yeah.
You want any snacks? How's it going? They're just absurdly awful. And
Yeah.
you know, it works for what the movie's trying to do, but it is just a cartoon at the beginning.
Yeah.
How horrible they are to Rambo and how quickly it gets out of hand just because how horrible they are.
I wonder if that's a commentary on something.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the real cops certainly don't act like that.
I doubt they
for
would do
sure.
something like that.
Yeah, they would never. Cops are here to protect us.
Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about? Any closing thoughts?
Not off the top of my head.
Book really good. I think it's an important read.
Yeah.
You should probably. This is one of those I would put like even if you don't necessarily like the content or you think it might bother you, I think this is an important one to read and understand.
Yeah. It used to be on a lot of reading lists from what he was saying in the foreword.
Yeah, and yeah, he was saying in like high schools and stuff. I wish I had read something
Yeah,
like this in
really?
high school.
And it's crazy because, like, I don't know. I understand people, like, maybe feeling a little squeamish about, like, some of the content in the book. But I feel like this is, like you said, an important read.
I feel like I read worse stuff for
Yeah.
my high school classes.
If
Well,
I could read To Kill a Mockingbird, I could read this.
True. Yeah.
and another thing is, like, the same thing with the movie. Like, I saw the movie, and I expected it to be, like, has anyone here seen the movie Commando?
Yes.
Mm-mm.
Jordy, have you seen Commando? Commando is ridiculous. At one point, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, John Matrix, uses a saw blade as a shuriken and cuts the top of a dude's head off. Right? So I'm like, oh yeah, Rambo, First Blood. This is gonna be just like Commando. And then I watch it and I'm like, God damn. I'm literally.
I remember because we watched it
Yeah,
together for the
we
first
all
time you
did
watched
it.
it.
We all saw
Yeah,
it
and
for
I
the
was
first
like,
time.
because I remember specifically, you were like, "Oh, yo, it's gonna be like Commando." I'm like, "Yep, sure it is, buddy." And then you watched it, and you're like, "What have I done?"
Yeah, and I'm literally never gonna watch any of the other Rambo movies after seeing
Nope,
it.
me neither. I watched the first one, realized that was literally the best it was going to ever get.
Oh.
Because there's like 5 total.
Oh, I kind of want to
Something
watch the
silly
rest
like
of
that.
them.
No,
You really don't. Like,
No.
I am telling you, genuinely, you are not missing anything.
Maybe I'll watch Rambo 2. Maybe.
I was about to say, in the foreword, he actually mentions one of the sequels as like dealing with a controversial topic. What is the?
Was it 3?
Probably if I had to guess, probably 3, because that's the Mujahideen. Thanks to the brave fighters of the Mujahideen,
Yeah.
The first
comma,
sequel. hold on.
parentheses, the Taliban.
The first sequel, 1985's Rambo, was an international box office sensation. An action film, it was intended as entertainment, but because it dealt with a hardly charged political issue, parentheses, whether or not there were American prisoners of war in
Oh,
Vietnam.
I remember that. Yeah, because John McCain, the senator, the conservative senator, was like a big proponent of the movie because of that. Which is a very random trivia fact for you.
And then it says it was also extremely controversial, as was the second sequel, 1988's Rambo 3, which dealt with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Now, after 1, 2, 3, I will grant you that. I don't have a lot of confidence in those 2 films. But I don't know. I'm kind of curious to at least watch them. I have a feeling
I
they're
could
probably
be
not very
swayed.
good.
I might be swayed. But
I don't know. I might just give it a shot and let you know.
okay. Or you could watch Commando.
I could watch Commando. Never seen it.
Arnold Schwarzenegger runs around with a shotgun and an assault rifle, and he's firing them in both hands.
It is a quintessential
In
Schwarzenegger flick, as I will say
parentheses, you
that.
shouldn't be able to do that.
I was about to say you shouldn't be able to do that, right?
I don't know. That man's superhuman in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but he almost broke his
Like-
hand on Terminator 2 because he was firing the shotgun one-handed.
Oh, true, yeah.
The one hand, the kickback,
Yeah.
just of one gun. I feel like
Like, that's
At
at
the
least
very
got to throw
least-
off your aim.
I was about to say.
Oh,
At the very
100%.
least, you're not hitting anything if you're firing them both at the same time.
And he's,
Also,
like,
why
running
do you-
around.
Why do you need? Like, isn't one of those kind of a closer range weapon and the other one's a farther range weapons? Like,
You need both. Cover all your bases.
Important. I'm about to say it's very important to his character arc to fire both.
what about the mid range?
Rocket launcher.
Okay, gotcha. I'm writing this down.
I guess any other closing thoughts, Caden?
No, pretty much said all of mine, I think.
Well, in that case, I thought book good, movie good. And yeah, I guess what's next month? Shit.
It's The Witcher. I
Oh.
think.
Turn
Witcher
a
book.
coin to no.
Don't.
Oh,
Do not.
na.
Yeah, We're reading The Witcher: Sword of Destiny, which is a short story collection.
I'm very excited. I'm a big fan of the Witcher series.
What if they did? Sorry,
What
you
do
guys
Yeah.
go ahead. You guys go ahead.
No.
No.
No, Ryan, I insist. I'd love to hear from my good friend, my good pal here.
I love hearing your thoughts on
So you guys
Let's hear it.
remember at the beginning of the pandemic when all of the celebrities sang that song on Zoom?
Uh-huh.
Wouldn't it be epic if they did that with Toss a Coin to your Witcher? Wouldn't that be phenomenal?
Well, everyone's video game boyfriend is no longer associated with the Witcher franchise, so
He can still sing.
that said, I think the guy, honestly, the best casting in that show, not Geralt,
It's okay, he's
controversy enough.
It's okay.
I think it's
Oh, sorry.
Jaskier, actually. I think Jaskier is unironically one of the best castings I have ever seen.
It's okay. He's doing Warhammer now. That can't possibly go wrong. That can't possibly be misconstrued.
Well,
There's no way they're gonna misrepresent Warhammer.
Am I the one who has to break it to Ryan that there's a bit of controversy with him and the way he acts, some comments he's made?
And with that, I guess that'll wrap it up. Our link tree is in the description. You can find all of our Twitters, all of our Twitters,
All of our Twitter.
Valley of Plenty.
And our Discord server.
Toss
Yeah.
a coin to your Witcher.
Bye bye,
Goodbye.
Witcher.